Cryptocurrencies are one of the big theses for the age of AGI. Why? Because artificial intelligence is revolutionizing everything, but also disrupting our economy like crazy. And I covered that in multiple videos. Go to pioneerlands.net, by the way. There's where we discuss the economy, the future of artificial intelligence, how it disrupts everything with exact timelines. We have great discussions there, and then projected into investment opportunities. But let's get back to Bitcoin. Why is Bitcoin so important? Bitcoin is crypto store of value. It is the best store of value in the world because it's mathematically encrypted trust. There's a limited supply, a defined supply, different from gold that you can always mine more of. So Bitcoin is the safest place to have money if there is inflation. And if governments destabilize. And AI brings enormous shocks to our systems. And my core thesis for Bitcoin is very simple. The government will have to pay for hundreds of millions of unemployed people. And that will happen much sooner than people think. In the next 3 years, we will see a complete explosion of unemployment in Europe, in the United States, potentially also in Northern Asia. And that will lead the government into a fiscal crisis of unprecedented proportions because they have to pay for people, otherwise they have a revolution. That is an enormous problem, and all that leads to money printing and more money printing and destabilization. Now they can hide it, but they have to do it. That doesn't mean it's the end. Inflation, right, can happen. Maybe it's asset inflation. Maybe there is not even that much inflation because people will be poor. They will get government handouts, but they will not have a lot of money. This is a complicated topic, but it will destabilize fiat currencies even more. And Bitcoin is the big beneficiary from all of that. Also asset prices in general, but Bitcoin, of course, the flight to safety. So when it comes to Bitcoin, there is something called treasury companies. I had a great video on that on MicroStrategy or Strategy. They rebranded to Strategy. I had a great conversation with Sir Basher. Look at the channel. There's an interview, I think a month ago. Got a lot of views, a lot of commentary. CERN is amazing. And he outlined the entire theory of MicroStrategy. Now, MicroStrategy, let's go there and take a look. This is a quick overview over MicroStrategy. That is a stock, a company that is traded, MSTR. You can buy this thing. And basically what it does is it just buys Bitcoin. Now, why does it make a lot of sense? Because they have a bunch of tricks up their sleeves, how they can buy more Bitcoin than you can. They're basically leveraged to some extent. Here, 14% leverage, right? That means they have some debt. They have 8 billion in debt. They have a market cap of 54 billion, but they have now 58.5 billion in Bitcoin. In other words, their market cap is below their BTC NAV, net asset value, of the Bitcoin they own. So let me explain this. Hey, creating these videos is a lot of work. Please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Now let's get back to the video. You're basically buying for $54 billion. If you buy shares, for $54 billion, you're getting $58.6 billion worth of Bitcoin. Of course, that sounds too good to be true because that means for each dollar, you're getting more than $1 in Bitcoin. But of course, they have debt. Don't forget that. So technically, you have to add the debt to this or subtract it from this to actually see the net asset value. They also have something called preferred shares. I'm not going to go into that. But technically, you could argue you have to add this to the debt, even though it's not debt. And so you see how you get to actually this MNAV here. 1.21, that's the number. I'm not looking at that number. I'm more looking at, I don't care about the prefers. I'm looking at BTC NAV minus debt, how this relates to this. So you're only paying 4 billion, roughly more, roughly 10% over the Bitcoin holdings after subtracting the debt. The MNAV is basically this number plus debt plus preferreds divided by the assets, right? So Why is that now getting to a point where I find strategy an interesting buy? Because here's the game with this whole thing. Because of Michael Saylor, right, the founder, this is an interesting company because this is all a big bet on Bitcoin. If you believe Bitcoin is hitting a floor at some point, because Bitcoin dropped a lot, then you can buy MicroStrategy if you believe Bitcoin is going to go back up. Why would you do that? Because the odds are that Bitcoin rises not as fast as MicroStrategy, because MicroStrategy has historically an MNAV that is higher than 1.21. So if Bitcoin rises, let's say 10%, right, to 63 billion, then very likely this thing rises more than 10%. So you get some leverage here. And let's assume MNAV would expand, right, add another 20% here to 1.4, 1.45 or something. This thing would go up 10% without this thing going up 10%. So MicroStrategy at this price becomes attractive. I wasn't too attracted before to this whole thing. I had the discussion with CERN, because why would I buy something that has an MNAV that's too high for my taste? I rather buy Bitcoin because there was a risk that MNAV was contracting, and I was right about it. Let me show you some charts to demonstrate what I mean. So here you have the price of strategy. It's actually down 54%, not very good. That's why I didn't like it a few months back. I was like, why would I buy this? And maybe you say, well, it's all about Bitcoin, so let's take a look at Bitcoin. Here is Bitcoin. Damn it, how do I do this? There's not even, that's too bad. How do we actually look at this? So I don't have a 6-month chart. Why is this so stupid? So we would need a 6-month chart. Let me see if I can find a 6-month chart. And then we can compare this, and you will actually see that Bitcoin went down less than MicroStrategy, even though MicroStrategy does nothing else than just buying Bitcoin. Like, look at this. Look at this here. Here's Yahoo Finance, and you see how Bitcoin, why is this not updating? Why is this all so crappy, my charts today? This is not following. So annoying. Let's take another look at another Bitcoin chart. Maybe Google does it better. Why is everything bad? Here is Bitcoin. Finally. Thank you. Google is solving the problem. So here you see a 6-month chart of Bitcoin. Today it hits 89,997. Funny number, right under 90,000. But you see on a 6-month level, it's down 13%. 13%. Okay, remember 13% down in 6 months. Now we go back here. And you see strategy is down 54%. That is why I did not like MicroStrategy. So even though it's just a proxy for Bitcoin, it went up dramatically more. You lost so much money if you had MicroStrategy. That's why you should listen to me. I was not a friend of this thing. I'm still not a big friend of Bitmine, by the way. That's the Ethereum treasury company, because I don't fully understand how they do it. Strategy is a little bit more transparent how they operate with their debt and their preferred stocks. But what we like about this, it's a little bit an indication how much leverage you have in this thing, right? You can view this as a question how much MicroStrategy is leveraged above Bitcoin. And if the premium you're paying over Bitcoin is very high, the risk that this premium collapses is very high. But now that it has collapsed, right? Let's go back to this chart. This number has collapsed. That was close to 1.6 at some point. And that just tells you how much more expensive MicroStrategy is than Bitcoin itself. You want this thing to be as low as possible, right? This is an amplifier on top of the Bitcoin price. If Bitcoin drops, or Bitcoin goes up, that's one thing. But this MNAV is an amplifier on top of it. If Bitcoin drops 10% and the MNAV contracts 10% on top of it, MicroStrategy drops 20% while Bitcoin drops 10. If Bitcoin goes up 10% and the MNAV expands 10%, then MicroStrategy goes up 20%. I'm speaking very roughly here because you also have the leverage effect. But this tells you, if you want to have some leverage in Bitcoin without actually having to do any margin or you leverage yourself, then MicroStrategy can be attractive. You just have to watch this thing because this can go down more, right? So I like this thing to be as low as humanly possible, but I don't think it can be much lower than this. Let's see. I don't think this actual number can go to 1.1. Who knows? It can definitely go back up to 1.6. There's no doubt about that. So you get amplification through MicroStrategy. I would never recommend to buy this thing when this is too high, above 1.3 or whatever. I don't like it. Even though this in theory can go to 2 or 3, if Michael Saylor can sell it, right, and issues more preferreds, that's how you drive this thing up too, by the way. So interesting situation, but it makes MicroStrategy now more attractive because I just think very logically about it. Let's go back to Bitcoin. I'm a very long-term Bitcoin investor. I'm not a trader on Bitcoin because I do not understand at all how this thing trades. I just understand that strategically it goes up a lot and will continue to go up a lot. The way to look at crypto is through market caps because there's no substance to it. You can't like look at it like a business. There's no cash flow. So you have to look at it comparatively to other store of value solutions like gold. I think gold is at 12 trillion and Bitcoin, what is the latest market cap? 1.8 trillion. This is very low. So gold is at 12 trillion. Let's check where gold is because this is all very, very volatile right now. But the current market capitalization is gold is at 4,000. Do we have the market cap here? I'm not a gold expert. I just know it's much higher than Bitcoin market cap of gold. What about this? 28 trillion? Are you serious? So I don't know if that is true. Maybe no one knows, right? So basically, they are estimating the total amount of gold, 216,000 metric tons. Ooh, if I only had 1 metric ton of gold, I would be very happy. But they have 216,000 metric tons of gold, and then they multiply with this thing, they get to $28 trillion. It's nuts. And, you know, when you look at Bitcoin at 1.8 trillion, I mean, do the math, right? That's why people believe Bitcoin can easily 10x in the next 10 years or faster. And you have to consider gold can go also up like a lot, right? There's no reason why gold would not go up infinitely if you keep printing insane amounts of money. So even if Bitcoin would go 10x up, it's at 18 trillion versus 28 trillion of gold if gold wouldn't go up. So then it's still like 60% of gold. That is how you have to think about it, because you can compare these two things. Because what's the point of gold? To store your value. Well, if you store your value in gold, why not store it in Bitcoin, right? And so they become more and more interchangeable. And it's not absurd to assume that over time, these two things will converge in terms of market cap. That is the strategic bull case for Bitcoin. And now is the question, should you buy Bitcoin or a treasury company? Generally, I'm not the biggest friend of these treasury companies, because why would you not just buy Bitcoin? But it's a question of leverage and price. And if you have something like that, and you know, very likely if you go into a bull run of Bitcoin, this thing goes up more, well, then you enter the whole beautiful world of equities, depending on your situation. Maybe you can't buy cryptos directly. Maybe you don't want to open a a wallet. Maybe you just wanted to do it out of your brokerage account, which is another benefit of Strategy, that is a publicly traded US equity. So all the pension funds and everyone can just buy this stuff. That's another reason why it's a pretty cool thing. Everyone who wants to buy crypto, who can't buy crypto, institutions and all kinds of people with restrictions, buys this. That's why this MNAV is very likely to always stay over 1, significantly over 1. So that is my point here. I find this increasingly attractive. Now, I'm not necessarily a buyer because I have Bitcoin. I don't want to sell the Bitcoin and then buy MicroStrategy. But if I would not have any exposure, I think MicroStrategy at these prices becomes very, very interesting. And you have to think like a value investor. Don't get pulled into MicroStrategy when this thing hits 1.5, 1.6, or 2, when the whole world is hyping it up. You have to buy when there's fear in the streets, and that means the MNAV is low. And if you want to be very smart, you try to catch MicroStrategy when Bitcoin bottoms and MNAV is down. The question whether MNAV is down, I think we can clearly answer that. I think it is pretty much down. The question whether Bitcoin is bottoming, well, that is above my pay grade. I don't know, but I think strategically Bitcoin is definitely a buy, and I like it that it's so beaten up. Look, it lost another $300 just while we were talking. So, food for thought. Quick takeaway, I think Bitcoin, it's good to have Bitcoin exposure. If you don't have it, MicroStrategy is an option. At these prices, I think MicroStrategy might be a very good option. If you already have Bitcoin, I would bucket them into the same bucket. You have to make your own mind up. What is your exposure to crypto? My default is split crypto into Bitcoin and Ethereum equally. Treat Bitmine and MicroStrategy the same as you treat Bitcoin and Ethereum each. So if you want to have $1 million, if you're rich, you have $1 million in crypto, you split it in half, 500,000 Bitcoin, 500,000 Ethereum. Then you decide, do you want MicroStrategy or pure Bitcoin or a mix? But if 500,000 is your allocation, keep it there, right? They are the same thing. If you have 500,000 Bitcoin and you want MicroStrategy, sell half of the Bitcoin and buy MicroStrategy with it. Don't expand your exposure above what you feel comfortable with, because they're basically the same thing. They're extremely correlated. MicroStrategy is just a little leveraged. So that's how I think about it. I think it's a green light at this point. If you want exposure, MicroStrategy, good idea. I think it's the most reliable treasury company in crypto. Just don't forget, you're basically buying Bitcoin here. So I hope that was helpful. We keep covering these things because crypto plays a strategic role in the Pioneer Capital portfolio to be prepared for the future. We have to balance it out with other attractive things like semiconductors, NVIDIA, and so on. And of course, the God King, very likely of returns, Tesla. But concentrated diversification is where the money is. The 5 best ideas, put them into the portfolio. That gives you the best performance, in my opinion. What these ideas are, well, that's why you're watching the channel. I hope that was helpful. We're covering Meta very soon. Zuckerberg did something very smart, in my opinion, that puts him back on the map in the AI race. I think we'll see tremendous progress in Meta, which I like because Meta is beaten down, looks like a loser, and will turn into a winner. I will cover why very soon. So for now, we wrap it up. I hope that was helpful. Now you know what I think about MicroStrategy's current situation. See you very soon, and go to pioneerlands.net where we discuss the future. Until then.